Hello, welcome back to the Twig Show. We're going to do some tracking today. We're going to start off with some basic tracking in After Effects. This will not necessarily be 3D work, but it's important to know the difference between 2D tracking and 3D tracking and camera tracking. So we're going to start with some basic stuff that we should all know. And it's really helpful. This can be fruitful for you with your own creative endeavors, or could even be good for some professional work, which we all want to have, right? So with the package called Tracking 01, you'll be able to follow along with me. And what I want to do first is just do some screen replacement with tracking, because that's a thing. People ask for you to do it, either for film productions or documentaries, or, well, rarely ever a documentary, because you shouldn't be doing too much screen replacement, because that kind of usually breaks the truth, but commercial work and stuff like that. So there is a file that we'll use. I have a couple of them in here that are like screens, just so that you can play around with them and try some other options and practice, because I think practice is really great. The first one that I want to look at is this one at the top of the list. Is called a Smart something or other, lots of things. I got you guys some high-res footage that well, that finger is a little funky looking, isn't it? I got you some high-res footage that I want you to work with, and it's important to think about the footage before we get too involved in a project. Footage, in order to track digitally, needs to be, well, high resolution is number one. Good lighting and clarity is really critical too. Things in focus, that's got to be a priority. And good lighting. So if you, and one more thing too, but as far as lighting goes, if you have footage that is shot without proper lighting, the cameras capture a lot of noise, and the way that tracking works is that it's evaluating the pixel information, and so noise dances around a lot, so you have pixels kind of all over the place. That will not help with your tracking unless you want to do a lot of hand work, frame by frame, which is, sometimes a reality that we all have to face. It's fine, but actually it's not fine, it sucks. Make sure that if you are shooting your own footage to make a good track, that you are well lit and that you have a camera with a big enough sensor that has good night mode and not going to create a lot of that grain that we all know what it looks like. We see it all the time, but we're so used to it that we don't think about it professionally in a work environment. Anyways, the other one is motion. Motion just can't be too extreme. It's got to be pretty tame, camera movement wise. So your camera, well, and even subject wise. We're going to be looking at this clip with someone with a phone in their hand with a green screen, and if that thing was shaking around like crazy, you're going to have a hell of a time getting a good track. If the camera is going whoo, 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 whatever, and doesn't have a chance to really grab the details necessary for a track, then you're going to have a nightmare. So I'm gonna leave that there, and we'll move into what a track is, how it works. This file is large, much larger than my composition, so I'm just going to scale it down so I can kind of see it. It doesn't need to be perfect, but close to it. It doesn't matter, because when I apply a track to a clip, it takes me into the footage window and out of the composition window. So for a little while, we're not looking at anything relevant to the composition. We're just looking at the clip itself. But I want to put something in here that's going to be tracked. So I have this just the School of Visual Media Arts logo. I'm just going to pop it in there for now, and we'll see how that applies here in a bit. So you want to select the layer that is the video with the information that you want to track, and you're going to go to Animation, Track Motion. What that does is, like I said, it opens up a layer window for that footage, and it wants to know some information about what you're trying to track. I'm going to zoom out just a bit. Notice it was really big because I think this is like 3K or something. So we're now in a sort of a new space. The timeline is still here, but it has nothing to do with this track other than I can forward through time, and it updates that in my layer window. But this is my composition window, and this is my special layer window. And also, once I assigned that track to be active for that layer, it opens up a panel for me here called Tracker, and it wants to know what sort of tracking information I'm seeking. And since I chose from the animation pull down, I did choose track motion, so it about the equivalent of hitting this button right here that says track motion. These other buttons I don't want to mess with now that I've already set up track motion, because it'll start to, I don't know, confuse everybody. But that's track motion. Don't push it again, because then that'll add 2 trackers. Which you can add multiple trackers for different things and different clips, and that's fine, but that gets a little complicated. We're just sticking with the 1 tracker. So the current tracker is 1. The track type is a transform. I'm just thinking about having something move from X and Y. It's going to kind of move around. If we look at the movement of this clip, it's like the camera is not getting closer to the subject's not getting closer to the camera, it's not kind of moving around or rotating much. It's sort of staying in one spot. So what I want to do is I want to identify one area on this clip to basically create a stamp and have After Effects process that area, that pattern of that stamp over time, and it'll record all that information as it moves along the X and Y axis, and then I can apply it to another layer. What is hard to tell is that there are 3 things in this tiny little box right here that is my tracker. And if you ever click off of it, or like maybe you go back to your comp and you click off, and maybe you, well, that's not going to work. But all you have to remember to do is select that layer, go to the layer window, and just make sure that that this panel here is active, because that's something that happens sometimes because you get sidetracked or whatever. So I'm going to zoom in, boop, boop, and I'm going to look and see what this track point is. You can see that it is 2 squares and then a crosshair in the middle. I call the squares the donut because they are specific to a region of interest and a region of search. Actually, it'd be like more like the stamp and then the region of interest. So my outer square, I can grab a corner and I can change it. The inner square, I can do the same thing. And if I push the boundaries of that outer square, I can kind of make it bigger and stuff like that, whatever. But the way that this works is the inside of this square is going to be the pattern that I want After Effects to sort of memorize and look for in all of the subsequent frames. This outer box is the search region, saying, all right, so now you know what to look for, this shape, these colors, whatever. Look for that in this area. Because if you told it to look for it in the entire clip, there's a good chance that it might find patterns that resemble it, and it could get very confused. So you're just trying to say, not a lot of movement going on, but this thing is going to be here in this area, so just sort of keep an eye on it. What I would like to do on this clip is try to identify an area that has good contrast, a good shape that doesn't change over time, and doesn't move too fast. So I have a couple of options. This little camera guy up here, I could try to use this, Or I could even maybe try to use like the shape that is between the fingers and the phone here, or maybe this little guy here. It's a little small. But if I grab inside of the middle of the donut, you can see that as I move it around, it gives you sort of a magnified version. See, there's that weird part of the finger. But like, this could be a good spot to use. It doesn't change much over time at all. Or I can try to say, all right, this is a form that I want you to use too. What we're looking for is good contrast and some identifiable forms. If it was just all black or dark, that's why you can't track dark footage at all, or if it has a lot of grain, because you're trying to say, look for this and follow this, okay? So I just said, this is the pattern I want you to sort of remember and look for it in this area. This doesn't have to be that big. It could be even smaller. Or it could be like this. But here's the deal. The larger the search region is, the more pixels your computer has to process, the longer and slower that this is going to have to take. So if you feel confident about your area, there we go, then just leave it kind of small. I'm going to zoom out again. And then what we're doing is we're only tracking position. There are 3 options: position, rotation, and scale. But right now I purely just want the position of this. It gives me 1 point. As soon as I click rotation and or scale, it gives me 2, and then I have to identify those. We'll get there here shortly. You want to identify your target. So you find the layer in the composition that you want to move with your footage. In this case, it's just my logo. Okay, cool, okay. So now I have to analyze. And it's best if you analyze, well, you can analyze forward or backwards, but you need to know where your playhead is. Because if my playhead was in the middle of this file, I'd have to analyze forward and backwards. So usually you can luck out and you can just start at frame 0, but there might be times when you have to find that right sweet spot and you advance your playhead to a certain point. You'll have to analyze forward and then go back to where you started and analyze backwards. It's just not that smart yet. So the analyze buttons are like a VCR, where you can hit analyze forward and just sort of plays and does it automatically, or analyze backwards if you needed to go in the opposite direction. Or you can do frame by frame. And frame by frame is really only there if you have a difficult track and you have to do some sort of hand holding through this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to see, all right, did I identify a good area, and will After Effects be able to move through it? I'm going to analyze forward. I'm going to hit that button. It's going to cruise through these frames. You can see it moving, and it's got even a little bit of a shake. It's having a hard time identifying exactly that form, but it's doing okay. This clip exceeds my 5-second composition duration, so I'm just going to stop. And now that we've analyzed 5 seconds worth of this, I now need to apply it to my target, which is the logo. So I hit up apply, and it says which dimensions, and you say X and Y. You can choose X only or Y only. I've never had to do that. There is never a Z because it can't track in 3D. So I'm going to hit OK. And it takes me back to my composition now. And if I just watch this video as it is, you can see that the logo is moving around with the little subtle movements of the phone. Super cool. So it's locked in. However, it's not exactly where we want it. Maybe the scale needs to change. Maybe you want to change some blending modes or whatever. I mean, in this case, this is not what I would envision my final output to look like. It's just sort of a practical example. I'm going to open up position, and I'm going to open up scale. I was hitting P and then Shift S. So you can see that position What has happened is that the tracker recorded all that information. You can see that here. The features center, and that's a little crosshair. Its confidence and its attach point. All of that's been recorded and translated into a position bit of information here that is applied to whatever your target is. So that's what all of these position keyframes are. It applied the location of the crosshair to the center of this logo. So all I need to do is change its scale. So there are no keyframes for a scale, so that's fine. But I need to change its position. If I click on the word position, as long as my playhead is over a keyframe, which is pretty much like every frame almost here, as long as it's directly over a keyframe, and I know because my keyframe symbol is highlighted blue, I clicked on the word position, every keyframe selected. That means that if I grab this, it's a uniform change all the way down the row. All other keyframes also have been moved in that position bundle. So now if I hit play, we should see that this image is basically moving along with it. It's not perfect, but it's pretty close. So for a first like 1 point track, it's just fine. Now I want to try another one. So I'm just going to get rid of these. Computer, please respond. Select all. Delete. I want to look at another one here. What is going on? There we go. It's like stuck. There we go. I'm going to grab the touch screen smartphone and have a look at this guy. So this has a few other options for us that allow us to get a better track. And these options are going to be utilizing the track of position, rotation, and scale. So we're going to use all three of them. So you have to pull in a target. And this time, since it's a rectangle, I'm going to use a sweet girl pulling a Christmas tree down a snowy road. That'll end up being my target. But my touch screen is the one I want to start off with, animation, track motion, and I'm going to set my track type as transform, position, rotation, and scale. And now I have two of those little guys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take them and move them over these X's. These X's are kind of a nice reminder that this is a great way for you to make sure you get a good track. This was done intentionally by the production company. So you're going to locate those X's and make sure that the entire box encompasses that X, and you can make your search area whatever you want. But now we're tracking 2 points, and it's tracking the relationship between those 2 points. In rotation, like if one goes up, one goes down, it starts to understand that there's some rotation going on. And then scale also, if they move further apart or they move inward towards each other, that's going to affect scale. So if you think about the first one we did where it captured all that information and applied it to position on our target, this time it's going to capture all this information and it's going to apply it to our position, our rotation, and our scale. So I'm going to make sure I edit target and that it knows that I'm going for this sweet girl carrying a Christmas tree, and then I'm going to analyze forward. And you can see as your timeline cruises through, those points should be locked in. Even if a finger comes in, doesn't matter because it's not interfering with those pixels. And they did that on purpose, because if the finger swiped over those X's, we'd be screwed. We'd have to do it all by hand. So here's the track, and it should be done now. I'm just going to stop it because I only want the 5 seconds. So now I will apply it to that layer, the X and the Y. And here's what we have. it doesn't look right, right? So we're going to find this clip of the girl, and first thing we're going to do is we're going to have to change its scale. So the scale, I select scale, make sure that I'm over a keyframe that selects every scale keyframe and allows me to change them uniformly. I'm going to get it somewhere close. I'll try that for now. Then I have to change its position. So I'm going to take position, I'm going to select it, make sure I'm over a keyframe still, selects all those keyframes so that I can do a uniform move, and try to get it as close as I can to that screen, and it's okay. I'm going to have to scale up. Oh shoot, I didn't select all of my scale. That was a good mistake to catch myself on. So it's going to be like, I don't know, somewhere in there. That's fine. This is not going to be perfect, but you should get an idea of what's going on. So now that clip is moving along with the screen. The finger is in the way, so that's not good. So that's when we use keying. And I'm not going to get crazy with this because there's a few things you have to do, but now that it's a little bit bigger than the screen, I can go to this original footage and say, let's key out using key light, select that green, it's gone, and now the clip moves with the phone, the finger's in front of it, and it feels right except for those damn X's, which I would use a little garbage mat, or maybe even try to find a way to use a duplicate of the footage that is the girl who's been moved, scale it down a little bit, put it on top, use a track mat, and call it good. Also, the palm of the hand is a little bit in the way. So this is not the best example, but you get the idea. It worked. Totally worked. Looks great. Now, I'm going to call it here, and we're going to come back. We're going to do parallel 4-pin. Yep. Tracking. And then we'll move into camera tracking, where we actually get into some 3D stuff. All right. Thanks, guys.